Well, hello, Shelley. How are you?
Hello, Josephine. I'm really good. Great to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you as well. I feel like we've connected really well, and we've only met virtually. So it'll be interesting to even reflect on how we've connected in this conversation today, because we're talking about belonging, which is a really important topic for me. I've spent a lot of my life researching and thinking about belonging, and I know you have too, Shelley. So um, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get here? And you can start all the way back if you want to. So up
Thank
to you.
you. Yeah, well, since you're in Australia and I'm a Brit in Canada, I feel like the international story is probably the one that needs to be told here. So when I was 11, my father emigrated from the UK to New Zealand. So I was an intrepid traveler from a young age. We'd go over to New Zealand every 2 years from the age of 12. Solo. My sister and I would go and we'd be accompanied by the air hostesses would
That's
look after
big.
us in the transits and everything.
Ah,
And then I went to university, found a really great group of friends, but the opportunity came up for a student exchange to Melbourne. So, of course, I was used to traveling. So it was for me, it was a no-brainer. But saying that, I had got a wonderful group of friends, and the idea of leaving that a group that I've been nurturing for the last 12 months, and I felt a real sense of belonging with to go, see ya, I'm going to go over to a student exchange. It was a big deal. And it meant me opting out of the housemates that I'd chosen to live with and having to change everything. But even so, it was an opportunity too big for me to pass up. So it was incredible. Went to Melbourne and I remember that was the first time I was intentional about the people that I befriended because I'd made such great friends at university in the UK. So there were a couple of people from the UK that had gone over to Melbourne, but they weren't my friends, nor my kind of people. So I kind of just sat back a little bit and really waited to really feel into the type of people that I wanted to connect in with. And I ended up making an amazing group of American and Canadian girls who were also doing their international exchange in Melbourne. So I actually went back from Melbourne with a bit of an American twang, which
I
was
love
very
that.
confusing to everybody. So I've kind of kept this. I've become quite good at creating communities, but and I don't know if this is something left over from my dad moving, but I find it also quite easy to leave, which so I keep leaving communities. But it means that I do have pockets of amazing people all around the world who are, part of my life. But when COVID hit and I was living in Wales, I was working in a multinational, I had two young kids, and all of those incredible people that I had around the world, it did not feel like any of them were in my life. And if anything, going on social media made it even worse. Kind
Yes,
of just
yeah.
seeing them and voyeuring over the lives that they were leading, really feeling like, oh, it's a shame that we're not connected anymore. But the reality is, when you're juggling a full-time job, you got kids home from school and daycare because of the COVID pandemic, there was zero headspace for facilitating anything outside of that. And then just as life got a little bit normal, I moved again to Canada midway through the pandemic to start a mid-career master's. Started all over again. We didn't have anyone here. And then yeah, the disconnection that I was already feeling for everybody else, it was really highlighted. We weren't able to have a leaving party because of restrictions. I'd barely seen
Yes.
anyone in the UK for like the last 18 months. And then we were thrown back into lockdown in Canada. So I was like, I had no
Fabulous.
choice
Mm.
but to reconnect with myself. And as a mum, I think I'd kind of lost myself a little bit along the way. And it was like, okay, I need to find myself again and really find that essence of me that I was, but with this kind of new learning, new wisdom. And I did. I had a few months of really connecting in with myself, doing a lot of inner work, doing a lot of coaching, to find my voice again. And what really came through strongly was I literally heard you need to help people feel connected. And it was like, I need to start with myself. I needed to feel connected. It's like, I need to do that, because I think the thing is, you teach what you need to learn. So then I started bringing some of my groups together. I brought my Melbourne uni friends together in a live digital event. And whilst we had kept in touch through like WhatsApp and the odd email exchange, we had never come together as a group before. I'd seen a few of them when they visited London, and I'd been back to Melbourne as well. But yeah, we had 8 of us, and 5 of us attended that first event. And it was incredible. But even sending that invitation, Josephine, like that felt vulnerable, from the idea coming to me to actually send it was probably months to send it.
Right.
And it's like, why is this feeling so vulnerable? Like,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful idea. Who wouldn't like to receive that invitation?
What was the talk in your head? What were you saying to yourself that made you feel a bit doubtful or vulnerable about that?
Um, what we've all gone in very different directions. Like, I guess people that go on a student exchange, it takes a certain type of person. So quite a few of them are real high achievers. One's got a VC-backed organization, really dynamic women. And me, I've just emigrated again. I'm probably lack of confidence after having kids a little bit, and just feeling less than. And you see
Yes.
people doing things on social media, and you just think everybody's living this amazing, glamorous life. And you're like,
More
am
glamorous than
I
me.
right? That's it. You're like, am I on the same, right? Will they come? Am
Totally.
I going to be just there waiting in that little
That's
room
right.
on my own?
But
So
they
really,
came.
that's where yeah, they did. And we've had 3 or 4 more since then. And
Mm-mm.
we're quite in regular contact as well. We've had an invitation to go to my friend's like country retreat in Toronto. And yeah, it's beautiful. Like, I feel connected with them again. And honestly, over the course of the last 2 years now, I've kind of done that with various groups. And they're not that regular. Like, I found about every 6 months feels enough for certain groups. Um, and actually doing this work, I realized that I don't now need loads of connection to feel that sense of belonging anymore.
Can
But
you,
knowing that they're there is
Shelley,
huge.
when you say just give me a sense of what the event was or is, or what's it
Yeah.
morphed into? Because it sounds like this has now become something that you provide, like a service in a way. So tell me a little bit about what the event is. What if I went to an event,
Yeah,
what
I
would I
mean,
expect?
way back then they weren't at all structured. So it was literally just come onto a Zoom. Since then, I've toyed with various metaverse platforms, because I'm really quite bullish on this. As soon as I heard about the metaverse, I was really excited. And
Yes,
I was
me
like, this is
too.
how we're going to connect. This is how we're going to connect. It's going to feel amazing. And I do really like the vibe of metaverse platforms. I have trialed them with various groups. A multi-generational group, I would not recommend. That did not go well. There were tech fails. There was
Oh
actually a
no.
little bit of anger towards me. And I'm
Oh
like, I'm
no.
trying, guys. I'm trying to make this feel good. But yeah, that didn't work. So now I do facilitate circles for organizations. So I facilitate executive circles, whether it's executive teams in one organization or executives from different organizations to come together to talk about topics like connection and belonging, in their personal and their professional lives. Because really, if we're feeling that deep sense of connection and belonging in our personal lives, it spills over, and the same on the other side, because
Yes.
really it's all about being able to be our authentic self with the people who we are in the presence of.
Yeah, I'm
So if we
smiling
get,
because I really resonate with that. Absolutely.
yes,
I keep talking about we need to develop workplace cultures where we can bring our whole selves. So, and it's
mm,
exactly in line with what you're saying. It's that authenticity, and it spills over in everything you do. But
yes,
you can't separate personal and work persona. I think they because in when we're in our default behaviors, we're just ourselves because we forget, that persona that we've created for other people. So yeah, absolutely. Especially when we're under pressure and rushed, you're left with yourself basically.
yes. And I do wonder if the shift to remote working has made that shift, because maybe it's like when you go into your office building and you can kind of put your corporate mask on. It's like I'm curious to discover if people have felt that. I wonder if have you heard of a book called Reinventing Organizations by Frederick Laloux?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
I love that.
So that was part of the first year of my master's. That was
Yeah.
on my reading list. And since then, I've become a member of Enlivening Edge, which is like a magazine offshoot of the book. And yeah, that talks all about wholeness as one of their real key pillars of teal organizations. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
been a
it's a
really big part of my
fabulous book.
learning.
Actually, I didn't
Yes.
realize there was a community that goes along with it. That's wonderful. So we might share the link in the show notes for this because I'm sure others
Yeah,
will
it's a
be
really
interested.
beautiful group, very international. I did a talk for them last week actually, when I was talking to them about employee resource groups, because that was in my last organization. It was a multinational. We had a really big office in Cardiff where I was, but actually my team was all based in Germany. So when I came in as a new recruit, it was a really interesting dynamic because I'd always been agency side and it was my first time in-house, which was a nice feeling because it was
Mm,
like we were all kind of on one team.
yeah, different
But at the
feeling
same
around
time,
belonging, right? As well. Yeah.
yeah. But at the same time, my actual team wasn't there. So I was still a bit of a lone wolf within the organization. And it took me to create an employee resource group around well-being to then really start finding my people within the organization, and then having regular sessions intentionally for the employee resource group, but also just having coffees and walks with the people that I then found were my people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. And Shelley, before we go on, I need to ask you, what's your definition of belonging? How would you define it?
Okay. So it's really, you feel a sense of belonging when you're accepted as your most authentic self and you're feeling supported, included, whilst being yourself. And I really get a lot of my understanding of belonging through Brené Brown, and she differentiates between fitting in and belonging. So when we fit in, we might be included, but that's not necessarily being included for being us. It's included for, talking the talk that they want to
Yes.
hear,
Yeah.
right? So that's the real difference. And I felt this big time. Last year, I I was feeling a yearning for community, living in a different country off the back of being locked down again. So I applied for my family and I to move into an eco village, which is like a small intentional community on Vancouver Island,
Oh,
and they accepted us. So we moved in September last year. We lasted for 4 months, which was it was basically like another intensive module of my master's because I learned so much, but it was hard. It was very hard, and I put my family through it. They did not necessarily, they wouldn't have necessarily chosen to go there had I not been
right.
the one going, come on, guys, like Yeah,
What
sorry,
was
what were
it
you
like? What were the living conditions like? This is
gonna...
fast. I
So
didn't
we,
realize there were
yeah,
eco villages in Vancouver. So tell
yeah,
us a little bit
yeah.
about that.
So they're like hobbit homes. So all the homes are made of cob, which would have school groups come, and I'd kind of help the kids make these cob walls and everything. But we
Now, hang
have
on. I
our
don't know
own.
what cob
Sorry.
is from an Australian perspective.
So it's a mix of sand, straw, and water,
Okay. Okay.
essentially.
Mm-hmm.
You just like mix them all
Yeah.
together, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
off we go. We did have quite an amazing home. Like we had a two-bedroom standalone home, but there was no proper kitchen. We had a fridge freezer and we had a toaster and a kettle, but that was it. So we ate all of our meals in community every single day. Which was really fun when we first moved in and everything was outdoors and there seemed a lot of room and the kids could run around. And then as soon as winter kind of crept in and everything went
Yes.
inside, and
Yeah.
we actually had to wear masks again
Oh,
because a
yes.
couple of the people there were immunocompromised. And that was like, oh, you know, I understand in some places that we do, and when I'm traveling, I often still do. But like when you're in your home, and essentially that community space was an extension of our home, that was very challenging again. Um, and I really felt towards the end of it that no, that feeling of being my authentic self, I really felt a lot of judgment, and I felt myself withdrawing from being my authentic self.
So tell me a little bit about that. Where was the
Mm.
judgment coming from, and what was that about?
Mm.
Because I'm sure that's not what the village was intending, right? So,
No, no. I think our focuses were very different. So I'd gone in there fully transparent that I was really interested in the social piece. So social sustainability is really what I'm all about. Whereas an eco village, the environmental piece is their predominant. Whilst the social thing, there are rituals. So every Friday we'd come together in a heart circle, which was a beautiful practice that I'm thrilled to now know and be able to take forwards. Um, I, I, it's really tricky to even begin to explain why I felt judged. I mean, I was working hard behind the scenes, building the program that I then launched and started taking people through in the January. And I put up on the notice board quite a few times. I would love to take people through this. There was zero interest. I put on yoga classes, and then it was just like there was pushback. And I think coming from a communications background, there was a lot of things that didn't work for me. Like they used text messaging as their communication all the time. And bearing in mind, we had 13 meals together a week, plus 10 a.m. check-ins. And then the texts were constant on top of
right.
that.
That's
So
very distracting.
it was very distracting,
Yeah.
very hard to find headspace to then be able to be delving into what I'm. So it was kind of like the narrative in my mind was constantly overrun by someone else's narrative, which that's their narrative. That's they were all consumable what was going on the farm, but we were paying rent to be there, whereas some people were literally just there and they were living on the farm, working on the farm to kind of what cover their way. Um, yeah, I'm still unpacking it,
I can
honestly.
imagine. I can imagine because what was your I imagine there's a little bit of disappointment there too because well, obviously you applied and it was an experiment, but I'm sure that there are lots of lessons for you. So I'm sure that's
Oh
you're still
yeah.
processing it because I can see how, for example, that shared sense of purpose because what you're saying is maybe that was there's a bit of a misalignment there. Everyone else was interested in the farm and the
Mhm.
kind of environmental sustainability. And the work that I do, for example, with teams, it's all about creating that sense of shared purpose. So maybe, there's a lesson in that where you saw that play out, and that's really there's a relationship there with this sense of belonging as well. So, and
Mm.
I'm sure that makes sense, but there would be
Yeah.
other lessons there as well.
I appreciate the thoughts. It's going to help me.
Yeah.
And one of the things, like, I'm all about innovative technology. So I think I kept proposing ways to do things better,
Yeah.
and everything that I was proposing was kind of pushed back.
Of course, because you're the new person in the group and you've come in,
But
you're
I
an
was like,
early adopter
I
and you're
wanted
going,
I wanted to add value. And it
yeah.
was like I just didn't feel like I was able to add the value that I felt I could.
Yeah.
And that was frustrating.
Yeah, yeah, and and
Yeah,
that sense of contribution is really like all of this has lessons to what we do in life and in organizations because
totally.
it's really with groups it is really important to be to allow for that openness, and we know that openness drives innovation. So I can imagine going into a group and you've got this wealth of ideas, and you want to share that, but people in the group are sort of there thinking, we've done this the same for so many months or years or whatever. We're just gonna run with what we know, and I'm sure they didn't even think about it as pushback, but that's how you're feeling about it. So it's really interesting,
Mm,
isn't it? There's a lot of I can see a lot of synergies between that and what we do in organizations when we don't we onboard new people, we bring new people in because we want their new ideas and their talent and skill, and then we don't create an environment where we can leverage that you know you can see it.
yes. And when you're just talking about onboarding, that's something that I'm really looking at right now, like particularly for international recruits and for people that come on board as fully remote team members. So how do we nurture that sense of belonging for these people, not only in their professional lives, but in their personal lives? If they've literally moved location and then started work with that organization, how do we really help them to integrate in their lives? Because if they're happy, if they become happy and connected and fulfilled in their personal life, like we mentioned before, that is going to overspill. They're going to be productive members of your team. So I'm, yeah, really, really going into work with organizations now on their onboarding.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And you've got a program that I'm interested in too, which is looking at um, executives and lonely at the top executive circles. Tell me a little bit
Mhm.
about that because I in terms of sort of circles and gatherings, what is that for people at the top team level?
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily even need to be at at the very top. But I think even just naming it that is just highlighting the fact that loneliness isn't just for, you know, entry level people that are coming into organizations. And it can feel very lonely as you move up because there's less people that can relate to the pressures that you're in, and maybe the when you get to that level as well, then there's often family commitments outside of work which add to the pressure that you're under, and maybe people don't understand where you're at. So the circles can really help people to bring their authentic self into the group, and it does work really well when it is one organization because they're having conversations that they just don't otherwise have. But also, like I said yesterday, I'd just done a workshop and I'd had quite a few people that I knew come, and it can feel more vulnerable to be talking in front of people that you know. So some execs do like to come and know that they're not going to be with people from their
Yeah.
organization, so they can share openly and
Mm-mm.
actually build new connections with other people at their level at other organizations, which has been really beautiful to see and flourish. And yeah, bringing in kind of the circle techniques that I've learned at the Eco Village, but also through Arts International and authentic relating as well. So I'm learning about circling there and, just refining as I go and really seeing what feels good. But one of the really big learnings that I've had through my master's education is all about reciprocal vulnerability and how this really matters to build trust. So I think of it like peeling back layers of the onion. And if we want to go a level deeper with somebody, be willing to share first, because that really takes the pressure off before asking something intimate. Share something of yourself, because then that person is more inclined to feel called to share something with you. And then don't go too deep too quickly. So like just peel back a layer at a time and then see if you feel comfortable going a layer deeper.
So how do you know? Because, I'm kind of going to all those oversharers I've met in my life. How do you know
Yes.
what's the right level?
Okay, so there's a relationship deepening game called 39 Questions with a researcher named, it's either Arthur Aaron or Aaron Arthur. And it's quite interesting. So it's got 3 stages, and each stage is 15 minutes. And you have a set of questions. And you don't have to read all the questions. You just go until you're set a timer for 15 minutes. So stage 1 is basically like the first layer of the onion. And I would ask you a question, you answer it, and then I answer the same question.
Right.
So we only ask something that we're willing to answer
Yes. Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then stage 2, you go a level deeper,
Ah.
and stage 3 a level deeper. But I've trialed this with people that I know and also with people that I don't know very well. And actually trialing it with people that I don't know very well, it was actually too deep too quickly to do all 3 stages. So actually trialing these kind of games with people that you can sense your own comfort levels. And then that means that when you're speaking with people that you don't know, you don't necessarily need to play these games, but you've got a much better understanding of what feels okay to you, and what feels okay to you and me is probably going to feel different.
Can you give me an example of a level 1 question?
Oh, can I? I don't have it here. But why don't we put it in the show notes?
Yeah,
I
okay.
can
All
I
right,
can
that'd be
put a link to
great.
it in the
All
show
right, that'd
notes.
be wonderful.
Yeah.
Because I imagine it's a really nice tactic to have up your sleeve for people that are trying to also just connect in, even outside a circle, to connect one on one, and, sometimes having a guide, having a sense of, well, I can ask this question and I'll answer that question. That's a really easy thing to remember. I might meet a colleague, or I might even meet someone for the first time. And I think, that it's like breaking the ice. Like, how do I
Yes.
get to that?
Mm-mm.
Apart from, that first question of how are you today, that nobody wants to answer
Yes.
with authenticity
Mm.
anyway. What do you do after that? So I think it would be really useful if just to
Yeah,
read through a set of questions, if that's available,
totally.
Shelley.
And the researcher, he developed these specific questions back in the 90s. And he said even during the COVID pandemic, he and his wife were still using them with
Oh,
friends over Zoom. So
wow.
they've stood the
Okay.
test of time.
Mm,
I
lovely.
think it was initially they were created, it was 39 questions to love, and they were meant to be used for people
Yeah.
making new romantic relationships, but then it's perfect for both.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.